Capella, and Lexi.
That's mine.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Go ahead and tell us what you are investigating.
Sure. So my name is Lexi. I'm a master's student in clinical psychology at Capella University. And my research topic is on adult children of alcoholics within the LGBTQ+ community. So starting out, adult children of alcoholics tend to come from a variety of backgrounds, but they share a lot of similar traits nonetheless. And cultural identity and community influence an ACOA's experience and can have a really large impact on the prevalence of additional adversity. And when it comes to cultural minorities, such as the queer community, how do their experiences as ACOAs differ from those of ACOAs of majority populations? So when researching this topic on PsycInfo, I actually found 0 results when typing in adult children of alcoholics and LGBT. So knowing that there is clear invisibility and the queer community is mostly absent among ACOA literature. So I researched these topics separately and found a lot of common themes that arose between both populations separately and combined them here in this literature review. And we'll be discussing the overlapping traits of these two vulnerable populations. So the first common theme was self-destructive behaviors. And these can manifest as difficulty with control, emotional avoidance, trust over responsibility, and ignoring one's own needs. There's also a lot of research on parental substance use, making children more susceptible to developing those same issues. And when it comes to the queer community, consequences of homophobic and transphobic abuse increase self-destructive behavior. And for both populations, it's common to experience isolation and low self-esteem, which can trigger these self-destructive cycles. Suicide and homelessness was also a very prevalent common theme among these two populations. And queer identification and parental substance use increases the risk of homelessness, self-harm, and suicide. Primary causes of disproportionate mortality rate among homeless youth are suicide and substance use. Parental suicidal behavior is also strongly associated with substance use. And again, there's a higher risk for their offspring. And queer youth are at an even higher risk of self-injury and are far overrepresented in the homeless youth population. The next common theme is interpersonal relationships. And this shows that the home can impact the ability to interact with others and form relationships. So by surviving emotionally within that family, it lowers room to develop relationships outside of that family. Attachment anxiety and avoidance related to difficulties and self-acceptance are prevalent as well. And fear of abandonment, excessive need for control, and avoidance are common. Next is the family dynamics. The family adjustment process occurs. So with the person struggling with substance abuse, that they become kind of the center of this family and the roles tend to shift around that. The same thing happens if a child comes out as queer, the roles kind of shift and there's a different adjustment process that occurs there. And blame is often placed on the youth for both of these instances. And it's also common for the children of these families to base their worth on their value to others. And this trauma exposure results in lack of developing protective factors. Lastly is identity formation, and struggles with self-trust and emotion identification occur. Parental issues tend to overshadow the healthy development of the child, and shame avoidance strategies are developed to anticipate isolation. And family members, again, are forced into roles which inhibits identity formation. So all of that being said, it's clear that majority of the issues that the queer folks and ACOAs endure stem from the state of their home environment. Growing up in dysfunctional homes greatly impacts adulthood, and these responses to stress and abuse often continue even after a safe environment is achieved. because these two populations possess such prevalent overlap, it can be hypothesized that due to this intersection of identity, ACOAs within the queer community have even higher susceptibility to risk than someone who belongs to just one of these populations. Because the stacking of risk factors, abuse, and oppression, future research is certainly necessary in order to better understand, protect, and treat this specific, highly vulnerable population. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
Lexi, that was amazing, and way to start it off just by knocking it out of the park. You have a great presenter voice.
Thank you.
A very nice presence, and that was really enjoyable to hear. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Were
thank
you
you.
surprised at the lack of already existing information regarding this overlap when you went to this inquiry?
I was, yeah, it was interesting that there was no research on the youth, the children of alcoholics, and among the queer community. There was a lot of research on queer adults abusing substances. There's a lot of research on the experiences of queer youth, but having those come together, at least on PsycInfo, I didn't find a single article.
Well, the good news about that is it sounds like you might have a niche here when you want to take it further in your career, right?
Yeah,
Rich,
definitely.
can you zoom in here just so we can get maybe a broader view of this if possible? It's a very nice poster. And then I also in the chat put a link for a drive that's hosting all of the posters as well. If you want to view those, on your own time or on your own machine even now, please feel free. Much needed research. Yes, Derek, I agree.
Do we have any questions? We have time for one. All right, we'll give people a chance, and we will come back and maybe have a question a little bit later. Let's see where we are with our next one, which is, let's see, that one comes up. Inquiry into lived experience of persons diagnosed with personality disorders. Hannah, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Go ahead and take it away.
Good. Hello, everybody. I'm Hannah. I am a second year in Point Park University's PsyD program. So this research is proposed and very, very new. So any feedback is appreciated. But my kind of overarching research question is, how does a phenomenological understanding of what drives someone to feel closer to the anxieties of death relate to intrinsic ways of being for those diagnosed with cluster B personality disorders? So the reason that I've kind of been thinking about this is I've read a lot of works from Ernest Becker and death anxiety, and I've also I started out being really interested in cluster B personality disorders, and I've gotten the opportunity over the last year to work with a lot of individuals who have been diagnosed or kind of in the process of being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So kind of the research is kind of looking to point in that direction. And the purpose that I'm kind of thinking about for this is to cultivate a more conversational identity around personality disorders and kind of the stigma that typically hangs around those kind of disorders, and to really try to work to bring to light the lived experiences of the individual and just kind of like how they interpret the world around them and what kind of causes maybe some specific anxieties or kind of really anything about their specific lived experiences. I think this is important because it's pretty well known that there's a stigma around personality disorders. There's a lot of hesitancy around like working with people who have a personality disorder. And given that personality is so wonderfully embedded in who we are as people, I believe that like a humanistic inquiry into their lived experiences is vital to really understanding what these diagnoses are and what they mean to not only the people who experience them, but also like the community that we're in. Excuse me. So this is kind of overarching, will be my dissertation topic. So still fleshing this out. I'm hoping to do some phenomenological interviews and conduct a thematic analysis to identify key concepts or themes that are coming up from the lived experiences of the individual. So I don't know if you all can see on here, but I wrote down some potential interview questions, just things that kind of came to me off the top of my head. Like, what was it like to receive your diagnosis? What kind of goals do you want to reach in your life? What do your relationships look like? And so on. Kind of getting at the individual lived experiences, both kind of connected to the diagnosis, but also just general life experiences or questions that anybody might be interested in when meeting a new person. So some research that has piqued my interest this far is Ernest Becker's idea of hero projects, and kind of coming to understand what we use to kind of make life more bearable and what things kind of come out of that. And also a lot of research on terror management theory, like levels of self-control, levels of self-esteem, how those impact our anxieties, especially related to death, different needs for structure and personal reactions to existential uncertainties, and how those kind of interact with how we view the world and what we kind of do to help ourselves through specific anxieties. So basically, all of these are possible emergent themes that might come from the interviews. And I hope that the themes that do present themselves can give us a more well-rounded idea of what it's like to have a personality disorder, and kind of get rid of some of that stigma that's around it, and maybe help with diagnosis a little bit, really understanding what that person is going through, so that there is no misdiagnoses, and that like comorbidity might be able to be mitigated a little bit. So yeah, that's my research this far.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Do we have thoughts that we would like to add? I can't see everybody at once, so if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Hey, Hannah, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I also don't know if anyone else is trying to ask a question at the same time.
You're good, Jeremy.
It's Jeremy also. So Hannah, firstly, I just love that this is your research topic. Like, I see you around the UCC at Point Park, and like would have no idea that you would care about this. So it's really awesome to see your poster. That's the first thing. And looking forward to seeing everyone else's who's at Point Park also. So the question I just have is I'm just kind of curious about what exactly it is you're looking at. So the way I understood it was that you're looking at like death anxiety, and how people who are diagnosed with borderline experience death anxiety, or how death anxiety could be something like causal or something to borderline, or just kind of, it's phenomenological, but yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious how you think death anxiety and borderline or cluster B sorts of disorders relate. Because I think I'm just thrilled with this. This is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Still trying to flesh out all of that, but my kind of understanding is that a lot of the people who I've worked with who are diagnosed with or are on their way to being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, there is like a real fear of not necessarily death specifically, but like just non-existence, even just like as like a person, or as like a whole person in relationships with other people. And so I think that's kind of what I'm looking towards, is kind of understanding their relationships with other people, what these anxieties really are, and what that kind of sense of fear about maybe not being a whole person, or like that feeling of not being a whole person. And also like there are some pretty a lot of the people who I've been working with have gotten into some pretty serious situations where death was a real possibility. So kind of trying to understand that as much as possible, understanding if that's even a thing that most or many people with this disorder experience, and also kind of looking at like the idea of like hero projects and maybe what it is that somebody with borderline personality disorder, like what they kind of pack into their hero project and different things like that. So hopefully that's the way that this is going.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for saying all that. And I would love to talk to you about this for a long while. So please feel like you can like sound me out a little bit if you want. So.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. This is Drake. I'm seeing here kind of a nice fleshing out of something that the diagnoses do not offer, which is this deeper existential and terror management theory kind of perspective, bringing in the death awareness piece and other things. So, while, what you seem to be doing here is a subtle critique of the diagnostic process without necessarily like waving firebrands about it.
Yes, at this point, it's very subtle. I'm not sure it will remain as subtle throughout the interviews.
Very good.
Fantastic, Hannah. And from the chat, I have a comment here from Mookie who says, fantastic research topic, many exclamation points. Interested to hear how being onto death existentially relate to cluster B way of being. Very nice point there.
I'm just curious if there's been any work Hannah could see done in just looking at the just content without any prodding of by questioning in a certain kind of way, whether content of sessions varies across different personality disorders, or what are some commonalities of content or themes that arise in just the content of counseling sessions that are open-ended for people with this particular diagnosis. I don't know if that's relevant at all. Just because sometimes I think when people focus on their diagnosis, that could be difficult. I have a client who talks a lot about his borderline personality disorder and how it affects his life. And some people may feel more shame or stigmatized by talking about it. And so sometimes you could get at information just more less risk, with less risk, just by seeing what is the content of sessions. Just curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've had many clients who, some of them, like, this diagnosis is a godsend and it makes so much sense to them, and it really helps them to understand like what's going on with them. And some clients who really want to reject it. I think for the purpose of like this research, it will have to be people who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I am curious to see how that would flesh out with, like, if they really do want to talk about it and that's their kind of like identity, or if they're maybe rejecting it in some way. And I think that will kind of come out in the questions, because I want the questions to be about their lived experience of like having borderline personality disorder, but also I want to include questions just like about lived experiences of any like human being that are like universal to everybody, and hopefully through that maybe fleshing out what maybe some of these experiences or some of these themes that are specifically intrinsic to people with borderline personality disorder.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And I know we have to keep moving here a little bit because we're 2 posters in and we're a half hour in. So why don't we
You
take
guys
a
are
look?
too good. We can't help ourselves.
Yeah, I know. We're doing great though. Let's see what we have. Do we have the Eco Martyrs folks, and hopefully, I know Christopher talked to me specifically, and he was not able to be here tonight, but I don't know if anyone else is here, Shannon, Sarah, or Lawrence. Is any of those folks there? I'll wait. I'll say just a brief word if nobody else is here, just to tell you guys about the project, because Christopher is lost in transit. He's trying to get home, but he can't get home tonight. So basically, real quickly, my undergraduates investigate environmentalists who have been murdered, and almost all of them have been assassinated. And it doesn't happen often in the United States, but it almost happened at the North Dakota access pipeline, where people were protesting and they got shot with freezing water. They got shot with, one woman lost her arm. And so when activists have protested against things that are causing climate change, or have tried to stop projects that would be environmentally devastating in a lot of other countries, they simply are murdered. And so what we're trying to do is share their stories. We get their names, and we write summaries of them, and then we share those summaries at various psychological conferences. And we're just recently finishing a paper. These are undergraduates who have written a paper that we have a little minor revision to do, but it's about, is there a difference between being a negative martyr, and there's tons of research on suicide bombers, but there's almost no research on positive self-sacrifice, where people are trying to help all of us on the planet Earth by stopping environmentally degrading things, and then they're actually being just murdered. So that's sort of the project in a nutshell. The ecological self is a concept that's pretty heavily talked about in transpersonal psychology, where folks, instead of saying, human beings are the top of the pyramid, we're the top of the food chain, we're the most important beings on this planet, and we can do with the planet what we want. That's kind of what they call the anthropocentric self, or anthropocentrism. And the ecological self is saying, no, we're just one part of a bunch of sentient beings on this planet, and we have to protect the planet and all those other beings on there. And so the ecological self is a big difference between what we see in sort of Western capitalism, and we see this in a lot of other cultures, but it's sort of a newish concept in the West, which is we're not superior, and I should say Western academic research, because of course some of the indigenous folks have always thought this way, but that's kind of what this whole poster in our research has been doing. If you think that not too many people get killed protecting the environment, I would say since 2002, there's been over 2,000 assassinations around the globe. So that's what we're trying to do. And I'm so pleased with Christopher and all the other folks for putting in this poster. So.
Fantastic work. Rich, can I steal the screen share from you? I'm going to see if I can make it bigger, and then you can stay focused on the actual dialogue and facilitate
Sure.
discussion. Is that cool?
I don't know if there's any questions. Yeah, while she's taking the screen share, if there's any questions about.
Rich, this is Brent. I was just going to ask, so if you could say a little bit. So you're with this research. Are you simply documenting these eco-martyrs and their autobiographies, their stories, like telling their stories, or is there something else that you're doing in addition to that?
Well, we're trying to use various psychological concepts to say, is there what does it mean to give your life to something, and these folks are not giving their life willingly. So when a suicide bomber kills themselves and other people, they do that with some intention, right? And if you look at the literature, that's all psychology appears to be interested in, is the negative martyrdom. And so we're saying, hey, these folks they're not, first of all, they're not giving their life willingly. It's being taken from them. And but they're also working towards something positive for the rest of the world. So we're trying to find out how psychology talks about that. And one of the ways we're doing it, we're talking about it right now, is saying, hey, is this a form of self-actualization, self-transcendence, as Frankl and sort of Maslow talk about it, unrecognized maybe in the West, but persons who are showing, in a sense, some of the greatest human traits that are out there in the world. They're doing it, and they're kind of going. They're being, first of all, they're being killed for it, and then they're kind of going in a sense, recognized. And we're trying to make a database. We have people making portraits. If you're an artist and you want to make a portrait of one of our, martyrs, I encourage you to contact us. We've got about 50 paintings made on different people and those sort of things. We're just trying to raise awareness so that when folks ask for protection against violence, that they're given it, because most of these people haven't been. I don't want to take any more time from the rest of the great posters. So,
yeah, we can talk more about that, but I'm interested in talking more about that, Rich.
Yeah, it's a very, there are some stories here that are so difficult to listen to. It's amazing, some things that have happened to people. So thank you all for your interest. Okay, now, although I can't change the screen, how do I, you took away my ability to, do you want to move to the next poster? I can't do it.
So I've got Leon Yang, who is here. I see them in the room there. So let's see if I can get that to pull up. There we go. Does that look okay for you guys? You can see it pretty okay?
Hello, everyone. Oh, could you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, hi.
thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm Leon from Taiwan, and this was my undergraduate program research, and I did that for more than 4 years, and that's okay. And what I researched was mainly about Taiwanese patients who underwent bariatric surgery. Yeah. And the reason why I did it is the post-bariatric surgery recovery process for obesity people demonstrates specificity and ambivalence. Like they may say, this is who I am, a fat person in a thin body. Or they may say, oh, their life totally changed, yet still the same. Or some people may say their life quality of life is worse compared to their earlier lives. While some people may say, oh, after they get thinner, they get some more positive feedback. So I think some words from them are quite different. So that's why I want to understand that more from more qualitative perspective. Yeah. So my study investigate the changes in body image and the bariatric surgery recovery experience from them. And I do a semi-structured interviews, and it's for 4 years. Yeah. And each of them have more than 6 to 8 times of interviewing experience by me. And after that, I transcribe it into script and do the reflexive thematic analysis by Brown and Clark. Yeah, and which they invented that. And and my main results find four themes. Four themes emerged. The first theme is the conflicting experience. And you can see a picture below. It's one of my, maybe it's a little bit small for you guys to see. That is one of my participants who drew that for me. She drew that, one is she was obese, but after she gets thinner, she finds out, she say that is, my obese self is dead, but my thinner self hasn't been born. So at that moment, she doesn't know who she is actually, because she find a part of her identity is that, but the other part hasn't been born. Yeah. And not only about her, the other 5 participants also have that kind of ambivalent and kind of struggling experience. That's the first theme. The other theme is causes of fluctuating weight. That is, we find out that the interaction between their emotional adjustment and their external environmental influence the weight loss path that is interwoven, and the recovery process is non-linear low. Yeah, that's the second theme. That is, they have some ups and downs, and sometimes they may find it's hard for them to get thinner, and sometimes they even have a sense of out of control because they find, oh, they did what they did as usual, but why? In the past month, they got 2 kilograms lost, but why in this month they keep their weight is still the same. Yeah. And the third theme is interaction with the external systems. That is, I think in Taiwan, it's we're in a culture with a close-knit family. So sometimes their parents or their spouse, their partners, or their friends may give them some judgment, or some people, they may get judged like, oh, you are so lazy or you are so sick to underwent this kind of surgery. How can you just lose weight by exercising more and eating less? That is some dark side of the external systems. And sometimes they also experience some really high expectations from their family, and they also have some secondary loss and secondary gain. That is the third themes. Okay, and the last theme I found is they have a motivation of persistently moving toward goals. That is, one people, they may say, they say that they want to live their life again. It's the only chance. It's the final chance they have to live a normal life. And also the other participants, he say that he want to earn a fundamental right to be fat. So that's why he wanna get thinner to get that fundamental right to be fat, and he want to promote a kind of size acceptance idea to fighting back the sizeism. Okay, and some discussion is I think each theme have a discussion and have some advice for it. Yeah, and I think for most is what Kara just have mentioned before. That is, if we can respect them as a holistic person, and to honor why they made this decision, and to honor and to respect them from a perspective view, from a process view, not a really just target driven view, like how many weight did they actually lose. It's better for them. Okay, that is my poster. Do anyone have any feedback or advice or some questions?
This is Drake. I'll jump in very quick to say
Sure.
I really appreciate this application of Rogers in this context that I knew absolutely nothing about. So deep gratitude to you for this.
Thanks for your feedback. Yeah. And I think maybe it's good for them to like have a process view rather than just a really target driven view. Yeah.
Leon, I just wanted to say, yeah, very nice job. This is Brent. Yeah, I'll turn my video on. I was really struck by the statement by one of your female participants that her fat self, her obese self was dead, but her thin self hadn't been born yet. I'm someone who struggled with my weight my whole life, and I was heavy when I was young, and then lost weight, and then gained, lost. It's been an ongoing battle. I had never was so obese that I needed bariatric surgery, but I could relate to that in the sense of when you lose weight, it's the phenomenologically, even when you're thin after having lost weight, I didn't feel thin. I still felt, even though I was thin. It reminds me of the descriptions of people who have eating disorders who experience themselves as heavy even though they're thin. When I lost weight, I still felt like I was heavy, even though I was normal on the scale.
Yes.
Some of that is because when you lose weight, you get the sagging skin, and all these.
Yes.
There's still traces of your obesity on your body, which is part of the problem. You can't completely get past that, and some of that I think is captured in your data as well. So anyway, I just thought it was really very useful phenomenological kind of description. So I just wanted to say well done, and I could recognize some of my own experience in that too. Yeah.
Thanks. And she also gave me an idea of space perception, because after she getting thinner, she find out she still regard herself as a fat person. So sometimes she may still feel like afraid of sitting on the chair, which is not stable enough, or she still don't want to be the final person to get in one elevator. Elevator. Yeah.
Yeah, I can. Right. I was thinking not thinking you're gonna fit through a space, right?
Yes.
And then you do. That was I've had those experiences where I've lost a lot of weight, and then I thought I wasn't gonna make it through a space, and then I did, and I was surprised that I did. Because your spatial perception is off, because it's habituated around a larger body.
Yes. Thanks,
Thank
Brent.
you guys very much.
Yeah.
And we do need to continue to go forward here. Thank you. And it looks like we have, Walden University, Gwendalyn Barnhart. Are you here?
I am here. Hello.
All right, great.
Yes. So basically, so I'm Gwendalyn Barnhart. I am from Walden University. This is my dissertation for my EDD. I am also in Antioch University's PsyD program. I'm a 5th-year student doing my internship up here in Nome, Alaska. It's just a little bit more about me. And so basically, autistic students face stigmatization surrounding their autism diagnosis. Many people who are unfamiliar with autism believe that just because an individual has autism, that they're not as capable as their neurotypical counterparts, and especially within the realm of academia. And these difficulties can lead to depression, lower self-esteem, suicidal ideation, and then also lowered academic success. And then basically, the problem exists that there's insufficient research-based effective practices that guide support services for autistic students in their post-secondary education. And I did address that in the study. Through the literature review that I had done, most of this information or most research has been done on children, but children grow up, and there's not a whole lot of studies in existence for adults with autism. And so, yeah, so the main purpose of this study was I wanted to understand the degree to which neurodiversity-based methodologies were utilized in the special education post-secondary support services. And for those of you who don't know what neurodiversity is, it's a different stance. So it basically refutes or challenges the medical and deficit models that state that because a person is neurologically different, like they might have ADHD or autism or something else, that they're defective, that there's something wrong and there's something needing to be fixed. Neurodiversity just changes that, and it helps to highlight the individual strengths and teaches how to focus on those strengths and build up a person from that, and to overcome, their specific challenges. And then within this particular study, I used a diffusion of innovation framework, and it was a qualitative case study, and I explored perceptions of 19 different staff members, and that was throughout the United States. And then the specific research questions, I focused on the current levels of implementation of the conceptual model of neurodiversity. And then I did a 2-step research process that included a short answer survey followed by an online interview. And then there were the findings from this study included I did a thematic analysis of the data. And then 5 themes did emerge. And participants in general had an overall general knowledge of neurodiversity, and that most of the support staff were invested in learning more about it, and there was a concerted effort to broaden their knowledge base. Yeah, and then to me, it was interesting how many people were already aware of it and how many universities were already using it in terms of their support services. But there wasn't a whole lot, if that makes sense. Let's see here. And yeah, basically this study contributes to social change just through evidence-based findings that can help professors, instructors, help those with autism and help them from their post-secondary education, because autistics grow up. And I'm saying this because this one is really special to me because I am autistic. And all through my life, I was on, in special education, told never to bother with college. But it wasn't that I was defective or that I couldn't do something. I'm plenty smart enough. I just had to learn a different way. So I'm hoping through showing that, neurodiversity, it can help others. So yeah, that's basically my poster.
Thank you for sharing that. That is a beautiful poster. I hope I didn't give anybody like motion sickness while I was trying to move around to catch all the parts. It's fantastic. I would have loved to have been able to see this in person as well. But thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your personal experiences as well. Beautiful work.
Thank you.
Good questions. All right, we'll give people a chance to simmer and maybe ask one a little bit later. Shall we go to the next one, Roxanne?
Yes, let's invite Alana Peak to the stage.
Alana.
Hi.
Hey, Alana.
Hi. Okay. So I did a literature review and then I did a research proposal. Also, I should mention I'm a master's student at the Michigan School of Psychology. The purpose of my literature review and proposal was to address the mental health disparities for foster youth and to provide solutions for these problems. So that was mostly the literature review process. This research is particularly relevant because there are more than 400,000 youth in the foster care system currently, and it's estimated that there are over 3.5 million maltreatment investigations each year. And given the current state of the pandemic, it may be assumed this number has grown. When beginning the literature review process, there were a multitude of variables which influenced foster youth mental health. To begin, ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, are typically experienced by most youth who are entering the foster care system. So ACEs are any traumatic event which occur in childhood, including neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, witnessing violence, threatened abuse or neglect, drug and or alcohol addiction, and being raised in an unstable home, which includes things like a household where a child's parents are divorced or their guardian or other household members are incarcerated. Some researchers suggest that the transition into foster care is a traumatic experience in and of itself. And it's actually estimated that over 90% of foster youth have experienced one or more of these ACEs. Moving on to mental health problems and psychiatric diagnoses, most studies utilize the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire. It's abbreviated to the SDQ. It measured foster youth mental health problems. It screens behaviors on 5 subdomains, which includes conduct problems, emotional problems, peer problems, inattention and or hyperactivity, and prosocial behavior. One study had concluded that 71% of their 237 participants had a problem and on at least one subdomain, and that 52% had comorbid problems. For studies which measured lifetime and 12-month psychiatric diagnoses of foster youth, there appeared to be a relationship between multiple variables. Those with placement instability, poor parental mental health, and a detection of childhood mental and or physical disability had a significantly higher risk of receiving a psychiatric diagnosis. Additionally, those with continuous abuse status were also at a higher risk of receiving a psychiatric diagnosis. Another study concluded that 59% of their sample had a mental health diagnosis. One of the studies concluded that severe mental illness was the most common diagnosis among their participants. Those included bipolar disorders, depression, disruptive disorders, ADHD, PTSD, psychotic disorders. There was a long list. Additionally, youth who experience placement instability are at a super high risk, like an extremely high risk of receiving a psychiatric diagnosis. And then demographics appeared to make the issue worse. So research continues to show that youth of color compose about half of the foster care population, even though they're a very small portion of the general population. To cover just some basics discovered within my literature review, researchers concluded that Black children are more likely to be removed from the community by being placed within residential institutions rather than receiving outpatient treatment. That Latinos had the highest rate of psychiatric diagnoses, followed by African Americans. And that Latinas, African American, and white women were more likely than males to have a psychiatric diagnosis. I covered a lot of things pretty quickly, and it's important to recognize that the problems addressed previously in this introduction were not extensive. Moving forward to mental health treatment, much of the literature defined mental health treatment as CAMHS, it's childhood and adolescent mental health services, school health services, educational psychology services, primary care, adolescent health clinics, CPS, and special education. Considering these services specifically, researchers suggest that about 61 to 68.7% of youth receive services, but considering the array of problems that the population faces, this percentage needs to be improved. It's also important to consider that these percentages include multiple types of services that foster youth utilize, and they don't specifically state what percentage of participants use each individual service. It's important to note that service utilization drops by 54% when youth exit the foster care system. And again, it's shown in alumni that more placement moves increases the likelihood of a psychiatric diagnosis in young adulthood, and that poor parental mental health had a direct effect on foster care alumni mental health. And focusing more on alumni now, those within long-term foster care had worse well-being outcomes, self-sufficiency, and overall adult status. One study concluded that foster care alumni experienced difficulties finding housing and employment and receiving education. They experience higher rates of economic hardships, have lower psychological well-being scores, and overall life satisfaction. It's also important to note that 66.1% of alumni had thoughts of suicide, 48.6% of alumni had made a plan for suicide, 37.1% attempted suicide, and 14.5% had been hospitalized for some sort of mental health problem. So my research proposal was rooted in uncovering foster youth and alumni's true rates of psychiatric diagnoses, psychological and psychiatric service utilization, as well as long-term mental health outcomes among alumni. With the limited research focusing on specific treatment utilization and alumni outcomes, it appears that this population has been swept under the rug. But in the meantime, psychologists must begin advocating for this population while pushing for more individualized and adequate services for youth in the system. Additionally, we need to provide more family-focused treatments that help foster parents, guardians, and adoptive parents with youth who are in the foster care system and for when they transition out of care.
All right. Go ahead. Roxy, do we have a question?
I know that my presentation is kind of all over the place. When I was doing the literature review, I didn't realize there were going to be so many variables that influenced mental health outcomes among youth and alumni. So if I were to revise my proposal, I would have to find specific areas to focus on because there's just so many problems that this population faces.
And actually what came to mind to me was that it's very comprehensive and that it's just a surprise how many variables there actually are. It's nice to see somebody put that all in one place.
I had to omit a lot of information.
I believe it. It's a wonderful job, Alana. Thank you so much. Okay.
Questions, thoughts?
Oh.
Yeah, Alana, I just briefly put in the chat, this is Gina, if you knew about the American Association of Suicidology. I was thinking because, as you mentioned, your inquiry touched on so many aspects, and suicidology is, I bet it was unexpected that your work fell in that direction. And it was unexpected in my research. You may find a great deal of support and they may find your work interesting too.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of them, so I'm definitely going to have to look more into that because I found there were so many ways that I could have continued the literature review process and the research proposal process because there were so many variables, but it's definitely one I would like to look more into.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge, the AAS. Good luck. Good work.
All right. Shall we?
Richard, we have Marianne is up next.
Okay.
Marianne,
and what is the name? I can't see anything anymore.
MarianneinghamMarion.
Welcome, Marianne.
Yeah. Shall I go?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Yeah, so I am a PhD candidate. Recently passed my proposal at California Institute of Integral Studies. Yeah, nice. I know, super excited. I get to put the little C after the PhD. So my dissertation introduces what I'm calling a self-compassion narrative for growth-oriented meaning in the aftermath of an adverse event. And the background for this was my own experience of making meaning after cancer and suicide loss. So meaning is widely considered to be of central importance to human existence. And one of the primary ways in which we make meaning is through narrative. An adverse event, by which I mean an event so out of the ordinary that it threatens one's identity and core belief system, can lead to a breakdown in narrative meaning. However, it can also be an opportunity for growth through narrative reconstruction. And that's certainly what it was for me. And so what I'm presenting here is a narrative framework that worked for me. I'll be presenting it as a theoretical dissertation with the hope that I will be doing empirical research later on. So what is a self-compassion narrative? It consists of 2 elements with 3 components in each one. The first element is being acceptance, and the second is becoming action. In being acceptance, we have the three components of Kristen Neff's definition of self-compassion. Self-kindness versus self-judgment, mindfulness versus over-identification, and common humanity versus isolation. And then there are the three elements that I have added to self-compassion: pragmatism versus fundamentalism, agency versus victimhood, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And so my working definition of the SCN is a kind, mindful, relational story a person chooses to tell themselves about an adverse event in order to create meaning that is beneficial to their growth. So far, there have not been any studies linking self-compassion with meaning and narrative. And by narrative, I mean narrative as a topic, not narrative as a method. So what I'm hoping to contribute is introducing this new and hopefully useful framework for growth-oriented meaning after adversity, which is something we, of course, all experience. And with COVID, it's very in our face, right? That this is something we will all go through at one point or another. And I'm also hoping to provide an alternative to the redemption story, which in many ways, it's a good story. It's a story that many people tell. Something bad happens and it has a positive outcome. There are certain problems with that. And one is that it's very evaluative, which the self-compassion narrative is not. There's no, it's not based on the outcome, right? A successful or failure, contamination, redemption. I can go on and on about that. And let's see, so I'm going to be using my personal story in this as well, with the hope of also showing how the writing of a personal narrative can facilitate growth. So I'm sort of using my story in a meta-theoretical way, and show the necessity of self-compassion to growth and transcendence, because we need self-compassion in order to have the courage to grow. And I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. I don't wanna go too long. I'd rather just leave it short and sweet.
Nice. Do we have a question for Marianne? Anybody?
I don't have a particular question, but I'm really excited to see this come to fruition at the final elements, just because it's very clinically relevant to the work, the type of work that I do. So thank you so much for bringing this together. It is a passion project. You will be on the journey of loving it, hating it, and everything in between. But I can't wait to see it when it gets to that final stage.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Very nice.
Okay, let's see here. If we are good to move on, I have Malika.
Malika.
Or maybe Malika. I'm sorry if I'm not saying it correctly.
Malika, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna wait for it to. Oh, there.
Okay, I think this is one where I transferred it to a PDF, and so if the font doesn't look quite right, I apologize sincerely.
That's okay. All the information is there. So
The information is there, though, I promise.
So, as I mentioned before, my name is Malika, and along with my colleague Lizzie, who is currently at DCU, we're going to be presenting our research on the application of body charts to map aesthetic chills. Lizzie's going to start off by giving a brief overview of our research.
So aesthetic chills are also known as piloerection. It is a psychophysiological sensation similar to that of goosebumps, but unlike goosebumps, which is dependent mostly on like the temperature, aesthetic chills are related more so to beauty. The researcher has recorded every aesthetic chill in the past 4 years, along with the date that the chill happened, the triggering stimuli, location on the body that the chill was, and the intensity. These encounters were then assigned a number in order from the date it was recorded and analyzed, determining the similarities in the triggers, which we were then able to categorize and actually apply to our body chart app. This approach incorporates quantitative along with qualitative data to create a holistic view about the frequency and thematic categories of aesthetic chills that occurred for this researcher. This research is unique as an autoethnographic study, but the most important facet being that the researcher is actually also the participant. This method of data collection is intended to understand situational factors behind the frequency and intensity of aesthetic chills. Our researcher is an ideal candidate for this study because his experiences were actually recorded years before the integration into scientific research. By incorporating their own personal knowledge and passion on the subject, they tie together the cultural and storytelling aspect of what is commonly observational research.
So because the subject of aesthetic chills is fairly novel, there hasn't been much previous research. Research right now consists of experimentation on the relationship between music and aesthetic chills. So instead of artificially inducing these chills, this research is centered on a participant who's already experienced them under various situations. Also, our research is more holistic in that it explores other categories as well as music, which Lizzie will get into.
While we found that one of our 9 categories, Malika just mentioned, the profound music, was the most common recorded stimuli based on the data that we collected, we ended up breaking down the remaining chills into 8 other categories, which are experiences of bliss, uncanniness or negative stimuli, emotional reactions to video, connectedness, the act of giving or like gratitude, enlightened insightfulness, meaning there's no external stimuli, synchronicity, and profound reading. And then with all of that, we managed to have 170 total recorded chills within 3 years.
The recent records of our observed aesthetic chills include intensity as well as location on the body, which is mapped on an app. So originally this app was like marketed to document chronic pain, but we found a way to suit the needs of this research. It has a scale of 1 to 10, and depending on the intensity of the chill, they're categorized as such. So 1 to 3 is mild, 4 to 7 is medium, 8 to 9 is intense, and 10 is a pulsar, which is a full body experience. So we had a binary categorization that allows us to collect data on the number of body parts without having to reference like the physical chart every time. This binary categorization means that numbers 2, 5, and 6 aren't used. So for example, a mild chill that occurred only on the back is categorized as a 1, whereas a mild chill that occurred on the back and the back of the legs is categorized as a 3. What we found was that the higher the intensity of the chill, the more body parts were affected. So in that case, like 4, 5, and 8 weren't used as much. So future research, the way we think that this could go includes investigating the relationship between aesthetic chills and one of the big 5 personality traits, openness. Hopefully our contributions to this field will help create a better understanding of what we know of like the psychophysiological sensation of aesthetic chills. Thank you for your time.
All right, do we have any questions about the aesthetic chill research?
Yeah, I have a question really fast. It's Jeremy. I was just wondering if you could just tell me what this person was listening to and watching, and what, I don't know, what kinds of thoughts they had. I'm like really taken by this, like having a thought in your own mind that gives yourself chills. This is just like gonna make, I'm like, oh my God, I wish that would have happened to me. So I'm just kind of wondering what this person was listening to or doing that was giving them chills. I might have missed it for a second, but I don't think you mentioned it. But
it kind of, there was obviously like what we have right now is 170 like recorded things. So there's more than just one. Reading wise, I know that we had a lot of examples of our researcher reading like the I Ching and just understanding and being like, oh my gosh. And then that was categorized as like profound reading. That was what we kind of put under that category. And then music kind of was a couple different things. Malika, do you know of like an exact, I don't know, I can't think of an exact example of music besides knowing it wasn't just one thing. It's multiple.
Yeah, it's different types. And also for thoughts, it could be like, so we call them like enlightened insightfulness. So it's basically like when you just, it's like having a moment in your life where you think of something and it just changes your entire point of view from then on. I don't know if you've ever like had those experiences before, but it's like maybe like looking at something just like changes your, I can't think of like a specific example, but it just like,
I got one. When you go to a museum and see like how they carve statues that looks like somebody's pinching someone and you're like, yeah.
So it's not like this person was like sitting around in their house, like musing in some sort of like a sensation deprivation place and was like,
no,
oh, I had this thought and I'm like totally moved by it and my physiology has responded. That's kind of what I was thinking. I also really want to know the music if it was like, you know, so would you know, or could you lie about it? So I'm like wondering if like, you know, he's driving in his car and like a Billie Eilish song comes on or something. And it's just like, it tells on, you know, your body tells on yourself a little bit.
It was only 90s rock music. That was it. That's all we had.
Wallflowers or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely different things. And none of this, all of this was like organic. So since we're starting our research and this is 4 years of this. So starting our research, but we're not doing any experiment wise with this. So this is it just happened. Like it just happened. Our researcher just happened to see this, just happened to think of this. And it was like, oh snap, I feel a chill on this part of my body for this long at this time. And then it was recorded down.
Yeah, it was all completely natural observation. So it's just anything that happened within like the environment.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm gonna like notice next time it happens to me and be like, oh my God, like that research. So yeah, well, thanks for answering all that.
Like your own body.
Yeah. Thank you.
I feel like we should thank you for this chill presentation. Mookie was mentioned in the chat. Thank you for your comment. Very interesting, relating somatic embodiment with the aesthetic experience. Bring about Edith Stein, Merleau-Ponty kind of vibes. And Alana had mentioned wondering if there was a different ability characteristic of a person that allows them to elicit chills within themselves without an external experience, similar to what Jeremy was mentioning. Fantastic. I'm curious, are the wallflowers still cool or do I need to leave?
They're still cool.
Okay, cool. Because otherwise I would not be jealous.
Totally awesome band still. You don't have to like
exactly
relinquish them.
Also, okay, thank you.
I have to put in a word for Billie Eilish. She's good. she gives me some chills. I have to
say, does Billie Eilish do it for you?
Exactly. Thank you so much. What a fantastic presentation. And then I am going to see, I see Dave Tomaselli here. Do I see Dave here? Yes, Dave, let me pull this up here. I believe this will be the correct presentation. And then feel free also, friends, just guide me where you want me to highlight or focus. Otherwise, I will accidentally find myself like reading and just moving for myself.
That's it. You know what? We're probably good right here. I think
okay, great.
We can probably stay here. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Tomaselli. I'm a second-year PsyD student at Point Park. So my work here is, it might work best to provide a little bit of context. So in working with my now dissertation chair, Matt Allen, it kind of started in a class on psychopathology where we took an interest in the socially constructed nature of mental illness, right? And so we read a lot of Philip Cushman and ideas of internalized, particularly neoliberal subjectivity, right? And so the idea of getting into comparison against, that internalized subjectivity and sort of the experiences of guilt around that and how that, leads to psychopathology. Similarly, I had another class with Matt on relational psychoanalysis for my practicum. So that's been my evolving orientation. And so in that vein, kind of coupled with the morally informed value conflicts with Cushman, I started getting interested in sort of the dialogical nature of self. And so getting into the work of Sullivan and the idea of like good me, bad me, not me. And more specifically, I guess Stern's, Donnell Stern's reading on that, where it gets to be sort of like contextually framed capacities for potential being. And taking that idea, Matt said, hey, you know, if you're in proposing your dissertation research, do something that interests you and something that you have a background in. So before coming to psychology, I was a corporate attorney in conflict of interest. And I had a pretty strong interest in work-life balance. And so it's something that I've taken a look at and thought, well, this is something I could engage with, because there was the idea of this encroachment on your free time. So like non-work domains becoming contaminated with work, thoughts of work. And so I came across this body of literature in boundary management. So it's a pretty substantially quantitative body of literature. And they advocate based on the data for matching workers who prefer segmentation with employers who prefer segmentation. So that's their segmentation preference. And again, yeah, sort of advocating for what they call psychological detachment. And for me, that feels like something that's increasingly falling by the wayside. And the research has said as much, is like this is going away. And yet they're still advocating for pairing segmenters, segmenting employers and segmenting employees, which for me didn't make a ton of sense. In my evolving orientation and relational psychoanalysis, that struck me as being akin to a recipe for dissociation, which I guess at the end of the day actually is probably counterproductive, and we're probably setting ourselves up for more pathology or more intensive pathology. And so what I'd like to do is, in this body of boundary management data, I'd like to use qualitative data as a bridge and see what emerges here. So if I can determine if people's experiences of guilt or emotional distress relative to like the good me, bad me dynamic in being called upon to do work in a non-work domain, I feel like that could actually bridge and kind of potentially operationalize this body of data and take it away from like a more commodified quantitative matching pairing of like, hey, let's just match segmenters, let's make this real easy. For me, that's an oversimplification. And I think if we could if I could potentially operationalize this data in service of a relational psychoanalytic model, then there would actually be a quantitative body of data that could, I don't know, essentially justify application of the holding environment. And there's been people who've been talking about this with, there's a researcher, Kahn, I think it's William Kahn, who has been advocating for this is a way to deal with precarity in the workplace and really addressing neoliberal subjectivity and kind of what it demands for us in being endlessly instrumental and so on and so forth. So my methodology, I was looking at potentially interpretive phenomenological analysis. It made sense for me in terms of being able to draw upon more implicit meanings in the data. But I've also been kicking around and speaking with Matt, my dissertation chair, is doing this as an autoethnography as well. So that's pretty much it.
Well, if this isn't a timely bit of research.
It felt that way. Yeah.
Ooh, huge.
I want to know what came first, the chicken or the egg. Did we get a work from home pandemic before you started thinking about this, or do we have to have a conversation?
I just remember thinking that we tend to be harder on ourselves than our bosses could ever be. So why not just give people, inundate them at home? Because we're all trying to keep up. So.
Right.
I think I want to know if this came before graduate school, because graduate school feels like the best one, where they just like you're on all the time, and You know, you do what you love, so you never work a day in your life. But the truth is actually you don't know if you're working or not ever. So yeah, Dave, this is great. This is totally awesome. I'm just thinking about you know, alienation is the word that comes to me. Like, you know, just alienate these parts of yourself, and you'll be the perfect neoliberal subject. Yeah,
Totally.
This is great, Dave.
And it might be too great a leap for you at this point, but it definitely has implications for a decolonial standpoint. You know, how are these experiences, personal experiences, colonized, right? Your personal time. Yeah, this is really fascinating.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the autoethnography. I think just because I have a lot of students right now that I'm working with who are, for obvious reasons of their research methodologies are focused on autoethnography, but what I've been appreciating is how they have been expanding that particular methodology, pretty much like you're doing here. So this will be really fascinating. I appreciate the graphics too. It's beautiful.
Just great to use Donald Stern in this way too. I think like Donald Stern always feels really kind of philosophical. I mean, both abstract and practical in a lot of ways, but to apply it to something so like so real, I think it's fantastic, like a really fantastic use of it. So
thanks, Chairman.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yes, agreed, Vanessa. Absolutely humanistic at its best.
All right. So who do we have next, Roxy? You're muted.
I know, I keep losing this thing. It keeps floating away. Francesca, I think I see you in the audience here.
Yeah, hi, I'm here. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Francesca Ott-McKay, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a psychology major minoring in religious studies at VCU. So the premise of this research has intrigued me essentially from the moment I heard about it. The study is an autoethnography, meaning the primary researcher is the sole participant who for every day for the past 5 years has made a full Yi Jing drawing using a random number generator. In addition to recording each daily reading, the researcher transcribes an interpretation of the readings and also reflects on their accuracy the following day, utilizing a 1 to 5 Likert type scale. Above the literature review section, you'll see 3 examples of what the Yi Jing hexagrams look like. Specifically, we've included the 3 hexagrams the researcher pulls most frequently. From left to right, 39, Qian, 15, Qian, and 5, Shu. The researcher has interpreted the 39 hexagram as a suggestion that some form of trouble is coming your way, and the reading urges you to remain cool, calm, and collected so as to turn the situation in your favor. This guidance is very similar in theme to the 15 hexagram, which the researcher has described as suggesting that a situation will arrive in which modesty will work better than the arrogance you will be tempted to respond with. Similarly, patience is emphasized in the 5 hexagram, which, in the researcher's words, means that you will have to wait for some results and that your wait time will be longer than you like. Upcoming work on this data will analyze the numbered hexagrams for the violations in natural probability that have been anecdotally reported by the researcher. For example, on 2 consecutive birthdays, he received the same initial reading. Our longitudinal study has recorded that particular readings appear to occur at a much higher frequency than one would expect, while others rarely seem to happen. For example, the researcher pulled the same 3 hexagrams featured on this poster the day we submitted it to the conference. Below the discussion section, we have included documentation of the handwritten hexagram readings recorded by the researcher, as well as what this data looks like once transferred into the Excel program where trend analyses will be conducted. However, the most interesting results we have are qualitative. The researcher has observed significant improvement in his abilities to practice patience, reserve space for ambiguity, and expand his day-to-day awareness as a result of working with the Yi Jing. In a minute, my colleague Tina will share the results of prior personal growth studies which parallel these changes, as well as some of the history of Taoism and psychology.
Hi, my name is Tina, and I am a former VCU student. I majored in psychology, and I have found concepts of daily personal growth exercises to just be extremely beneficial in my own life, as well as just interesting in general. And this study of personal growth practice takes inspiration from the works of humanistic psychologists like Carl Jung. He was among the first to tie Taoism into Western psychology in 1950, and he emphasized the importance of regular introspection, self-knowledge, and strengthening intuition. Another notable humanistic psychologist was Sidney Girard. He described how revolutionary a personal growth practice could be for the mind. He asserted that it could lead to a sense of wholeness, healing, and expansion of consciousness. Recent research investigating mindfulness has also shaped the course of the autoethnography. Schultz and Pargament in 2005 identified spirituality as being a significant determinant in how effective mindfulness techniques were in improving psychological outcomes. Though it is often mistaken for an organized religion, Taoism is kind of more akin to a way of life. The Tao Te Ching is a fundamental text of Taoism dating back thousands of years. And though each excerpt has a different message, they all contain similar themes promoting gratitude, bliss, and humility. In addition, they warn that we avoid conflict caused by anger, jealousy, and greed. Finally, in John Blofeld's Introduction to the Aging, he describes the individual who exemplifies these teachings as someone who is able to reconcile whatever can be reconciled, who knows how to stand aside rather than waste his effort on the impossible. Blofeld suggests that consulting the aging can benefit a person in the following ways: freeing ourselves from anxiety, becoming harmless or even intelligently helpful to others, and pleasant companions to ourselves. Because of the philosophical nature of the aging, the researcher hypothesizes that some of these psychological benefits may be particular to utilizing this text. Future research should continue documenting the benefits of daily personal growth, and particularly the impacts of Taoism texts, such as the Ye Jing, might have on psychological well-being. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this autoethnography of Taoism.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
I was just going to point her toward Dr. Luis Sonderangen's work, who has written about and done a great deal of research in Taoism from humanistic lens. Look for her. Good works.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. If we are ready for the next presentation, Anna, I think I see you here. Anastasia?
Yes, hi.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. So, hi everyone. My name's Anna, and I'm currently a second-year doctoral student at Point Park University, and I'm really excited to be here tonight. So my presentation tonight will be focused on outlining future research I plan to conduct for my dissertation, which will be an exploration into the notion of Catholic guilt and its potential impact on women's relationship with sex and intimacy. So Catholic guilt has been defined as a persistent feeling of diminished worth, typically related to a sense of moral wrongdoings or shortcomings. So broadly speaking, I became really interested in how such a sense of worth, especially when tied to moralistic values and expectations, may affect an individual's personal relationship with sex and intimacy, sparked by both my personal experiences in growing up Catholic and a growing sense of just general curiosity. I found myself becoming increasingly interested in how this potential persistent feeling of diminished worth could impact an individual's relationship with themselves and others, especially when intersecting with the very intimate, confusing, and sometimes weird experiences that can make up a person's sexual development. So this overarching curiosity was eventually whittled down to focusing on the female experience, both to make the project a bit more feasible and because I suspect that such research would showcase that manifestations of Catholic guilt may differ based on one's gender identification. And I want to give the proper space and care within the research and subsequent analysis to explore what those nuanced differences may look like. But such exploration would be a later on down the road post-dissertation world for me. But my current plan for future research regarding this topic is as outlined in my slide, would be phenomenological interviews and a subsequent thematic analysis that will focus on the lived experiences of women during what they consider to be their first sexual experience. Well, there's been a decent amount of research done regarding the impact that Catholicism may have on an individual's relationship with sex, intimacy, guilt, and shame. I haven't found much research done on the topic that approaches this issue from a phenomenological lens or with women as the primary focus. So ideally, the participant pool would consist of women who have grown up within the Catholic faith, half of whom are still practicing and half that are no longer identifying as Catholic or practicing Catholicism, in order to see if there are differences in how they describe their sexual experiences and the role that sex and intimacy may play in their lives and potential conceptualizations of self. So this project is still very much in its infancy stage, so I'm open to any feedback you may have or questions, but I appreciate your time and taking the time to listen to me tonight.
Wow, fascinating. You didn't pick up the biggest rock in the road, did you, Anastasia? Wow, what potential beautiful, tender healing I see here. My goodness. My goodness, I'm curious about this one.
You and me both.
Yep, yep. Beautiful.
Thank you.
I have a question yet again, but I don't want to hog the time. I've been asking questions after many of these. So yeah. So if anyone has a question.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, cool. So my question for you, Anna, is so are you just looking at sex and intimacy outside of marriage? So is this like kind of like if you're just like, because I mean, I imagine you might get different experiences, people who grew up Catholic and then like want to go into like hookup culture, like start sleeping with random people or going to orgies or something, as opposed to people who may have grown up Catholic, remained Catholic, and now have sexual experiences that are like wonderfully fulfilling and the culmination of God's love or something. And I'm kind of just wondering if you intend to just like look at how it goes, or if you're focusing on some area of that in particular.
It hasn't been, at least so far, like an explicit question that's been in my mind about it. I imagine that would arise. That's kind of, I think, part of the reasoning behind trying to separate the participant pool into including people or women who are still practicing Catholicism and kind of have grown up within the church, and versus those who are not still practicing Catholicism, and see if like that desire for the hookup culture or desire to be only participate in marital sex, if that affects like based on the participant pool. But no, it hasn't been a specific question of mine yet, but it's an interesting perspective that I'll probably ponder a bit more about and maybe include in future research.
Yeah, well, and I think the unspoken assumption you're making there, Jeremy, is that following that all the way through, that there is intimacy. I mean, we don't even know that. I mean, right? I mean, do we know that every, that given what you're describing here, that there is a depth of intimacy in these marital relationships?
Yeah,
I would be really curious if there is.
There has been some research done on like sex sacredness and how that affects people's relationships with sex and intimacy based on their marital status. And there has been some studies that have shown that people who are still practicing Catholicism and waited until they were kind of within the marital union to have sex did find it to be a bit more sacred than others who were participating in like hookup culture, but that's very like limited research. I'm not quite sure how that would intersect with kind of my curiosity regarding it and how like my overall conceptualization of it would be, but yeah.
Wow, I think you've piqued a lot of people's interest here already.
Yes, and I encourage all of our speakers, presenting speakers, if you get a chance before the session ends, kind of peruse through the chat as you're speaking. It might be a little bit hard to see some of the comments there. We read the ones that are questions or comments, but there's a lot of support for a lot of people's presentations here. And so it might be nice to kind of read that from your fellow colleagues as well.
This is Peggy Kleinplatz. I'm hoping I can jump in for just 1 second.
Yes, hi Peggy, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't have access to the chat, but it occurred to me that Anna might find the work of Daniel Helminiak really useful. I don't know if you've come across it. He's a Division 32 member, and he's a professor at the University of West Georgia, and he writes about Catholic Teachings and Sexuality. In fact, he's been silenced by the Vatican for his writings on the subject. So if you don't know his stuff, it's definitely worth knowing. His first book on the subject was called The Human Core of Spirituality. And that chapter alone was more than enough to get him silenced. Also, if I can help in any way, I'm a sex therapist, and I'm an existential experiential psychologist. So please call me if I can be of any help.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Good luck.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I will definitely look up his work.
Thank you, Peggy. I put those in the chat too, just so we can keep track of your name here as well, with the generous offer to connect and the Human Core of Spirituality. Did I get that right for the author, for the book?
You did.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful work, Anna. And so this is going to get the interesting part of it. Do we have Chris here? Is Chris in our meeting? Let's see, I'm logging in for Chris. Okay, so where we're at is I have a couple video audio visual presentations for people who either could not be here or are here but submitted something. And so I wanted to give an opportunity, since we've gone through, I believe, everybody who is present. Should we do maybe a second roll call? Annalena Hernandez, did you get a chance to check back in maybe? I feel like I'm doing roll call for class. And then, so what I'll do is figure out how to share these audio pieces and the video. We will start with Melody Montano, who I believe has a research group with her. Is anyone from Melody's research group here as well?
Savannah says she hasn't gone yet.
Savannah, which presentation? Do you have a lead researcher on your presentation?
I did a lit review. I sent it to Dr. Butts King, but I'm not sure how.
You know what? I think it didn't get to me, but we can take a look at it. How about?
I have my PowerPoint up if you want me to screen share really quickly.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And I will figure out how to give you the screen share. Derek, are you here?
She probably has to take it herself, right?
Yeah, she could probably take over.
Can she pick it up? Okay, great. So maybe I'll stop my share. Okay, that helps.
Let's see. Can you see this?
Yes, if it's possible to put it in presenter mode, it might just be a little bit bigger in the PowerPoint.
Let's see.
Very nice present poster.
Ooh, yikes, I don't know how to do that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's finds way. On the bottom corner, it used to have presenter mode, but I think they've changed this since the last time I really used PowerPoint. Maybe I do have to take my Wallflower CD and go.
I'm just clicking buttons. Is this better?
This is perfect. Fantastic.
Oops, can you still see it, or did I click out of it?
I still see it. Does everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
Looks good.
It's there.
I hope I can focus on mine now. My mind is going like a million directions after everyone's presentations. They were so good. So I did, oh, I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. I just had it up. Am I still screen sharing?
Not that I see right now.
Can you see this?
I don't see anything.
We're just seeing you right
The answer
now.
is no. No, we can't. Everyone's just shaking their head silently. Just
Okay, I don't see anybody. I see the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay. Do you see the one that says effects of lead exposure?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my presentation, I did a literature review on the effects of lead exposure on child development. I used the Flint water crisis as a case example. It's pretty near and dear to me. I'm from Flint. We live in Flint. My family lives in Flint. I was exposed, my husband, my oldest daughter. I'm in the master's program at MSP right now. I was accepted to this ID program. So upon graduation, I do want to open a practice in my community and work with the kids that were exposed. So just really diving into this is really important to me. So firstly, I think everyone knows just the big developmental changes that take place throughout development, cognitive, physical, social, social and emotional. I think a lot of people know lead exposure is bad, but that's sometimes as much as they know. And maybe they think once exposure stops that everything is fine afterwards. With lead exposure, the effects are permanent, they're long-term. They're not reversible. The thing about lead exposure is that exposure can be preventable. So kids are 4 to 5 times more likely than adults to experience lead exposure. And then children around 3 and under are at the greatest risk because they're more likely to stick things in their mouths that they shouldn't. Let's see. So impacts on development. The big ones are brain damage, slowed growth and development, learning and behavioral, speech and hearing problems, and damage to the nervous system. There are region-specific reductions in brain's gray matter following childhood exposure. And until I did this project, I didn't know that there were more pronounced neuroanatomical findings in males that have been exposed versus females. They had males in their adult life showed greater loss in gray matter. Prenatal exposure, if a pregnant woman is exposed, it's detrimental to the fetus, but mostly in the 3rd trimester, around 28 weeks, as that's the time of brain development where that would signify their IQ later in life. Causes of exposure, it can occur through soil, paint, water, and other products. In the late 70s, they did the lead paint ban because they found out how toxic that it was. So now they're finding one of the greatest exposures is through water. Exposure can be isolated or reoccurring. They're like, both terms are used, lead exposure and lead poisoning. Lead poisoning is just when there's repeated exposure and lead builds up in the blood, and it's detectable through a blood test at high levels. Impacts on functioning of lead exposure and poisoning is that when someone is exposed to lead, it goes to brain, liver, kidney, and bones. When it's on the brain, it's considered a non-traumatic brain injury, and it really impacts the frontal lobes and the and what they call it, anterior cingulate cortex. And those parts of the brain are responsible for executive functioning, mood regulation, and decision-making. So results of exposure are most often cognitive deficits and behavioral problems. So decreased functioning, and again, when someone is exposed or they have lead exposure or lead poisoning, oftentimes the symptoms don't show up for years. So when someone is exhibiting these cognitive deficits, they often aren't even correlated to lead exposure because they're so later on. So again, decreased functioning and the neurological impacts could lead to an array of psychological problems and derail sequential development. Sequential development would be like, someone who's in preschool or kindergarten would have social, emotional skills under control. And then by the time they get to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, then they can learn math and reading. So, at the time where they're supposed to be doing math and reading in 1st and 2nd grade, now they're their main focus is on their social and emotional skills because that's been derailed. So prevention and interventions, ultimately awareness of how exposure can occur so you can avoid that. Well visits during the first 5 years of life, especially if you're on Medicaid. It's a requirement for Medicaid recipients that they do the blood lead level checks at the wellness visits with the doctors. If someone is exposed, they can have a lead abatement diet that will decrease absorption of the lead into their body. And I think this is really important that clinicians remain mindful of the etiology of the symptoms, as interventions for presenting symptoms may not be appropriate. So if someone's, as a clinician, if someone is presenting as hyperactive or impulsive and you're trying to treat them with a stimulant because you think that they may have ADHD, the stimulant isn't going to be effective because it's not due to a decrease in dopamine. Their behavior is due to damage to the frontal lobes. So I think that's just important to keep in mind as a possibility that you could see with clients. Again, there's meditation and mindfulness have been effective for activating frontal lobe. Neuropsych testing provides a baseline for helping clients, and psychotherapy for coping and compensatory strategies. Then just really briefly with the water crisis, I hope most of you are aware of it. Started in 2014 and it is still going on. There was about 90,000 residents exposed and 30,000 of those were children. The effects, so the long-term effects of the children here through their exposure it's showing up now 5 to 7 years later from the exposure, and it's showing up in the classrooms, and they're starting to call it crisis in the classroom. And there's been an increased demand for individualized education programs and behavioral interventions. And roughly 70% of the students tested require school accommodations. And Flint is essentially switching to like a charter program to where they can just accommodate the entire classroom for the special needs of the children. Extreme emotional and behavioral reactions. Teachers are reporting just several students throwing chairs, flipping desks, just emotional outbursts that wouldn't be typical for people in 5th grade or middle school. And then again, another impact, long-term impact, is as the lead sits in the bones for women, once they become pregnant, the exposure in the bones becomes a source of exposure to the fetus. So that's another exposure, lead exposure. Interventions would include special education services for the classroom, special accommodations, lead abatement diet plans through DHS, through Flint here. They have it through the Flint Farmers Market. They have like pamphlets, flyers, specified meals they can help people pick out, which is really helpful. There's something out here called the CRIM program. John Abbott-Zinn, I believe is his name. He helped implement a mindfulness program for the students at the Flint School. So like I mentioned, the meditation and mindfulness students who have had the exposure to lead, they start their day out with those programs at school. And so just to wrap it up, prevention is ideal. If someone has been exposed, reducing exposure would then be ideal, but ultimately, if you've been exposed or technically poisoned, focusing on the neurological impacts and interventions is vital. And thank you everybody for listening.
Just have it available for people to be
Hello,
able.
and thank you
Can
for
anyone hear that?
showing interest in our study, Wishing Upon a Star, Making Meaning of the
Working now.
Sky. Have you ever found yourself in a reflective space, asking yourself, what is the meaning of life? Is there a meaning of life? What is the purpose of my life? Such existential questions can and have been shown to lead to an overwhelming sense of anxiety. James Kelly argued that individuals experiencing anxiety often look to the night sky to cope. He subsequently termed the adoration and psychological attachment to dark skies as Nacht Kala Dor, and through his research found that a positive relationship existed between personality types such as openness to experiences and agreeableness are interconnected to the adoration of night sky watching. In our study, Wishing Upon a Star, Making Meaning of Viewing the Dark Skies, we attempted to further validate Kelly's findings by examining the relationship between Goldberg's Big Five personality types and an interest in viewing the dark skies. We also looked to see whether there was a relationship between the search for meaning and a love for dark sky viewing. Ultimately, our quest to understand the connections between personality traits, meaning making, and Not Kayla Door serves as a stepping stone to a grander goal of utilizing night sky viewing as a potential intervention for those with intensive anxiety disorders such as agoraphobia.
Hi, my name is Kinda, and I want to thank you for coming to our Wishing Upon a Star, Making Meaning of Viewing the Dark Skies research presentation. Now, if you're anything like us, there's something about the night sky, the stars, the moon, constellations that captivates you. As a group, we sort of pondered, why might that be? Why do some of us love going for walks under the stars while others are afraid of the dark? Well, we came up with the following hypotheses as a group. From the humanistic experiential perspective, we predicted that Not Kayla Door inventory scores would be significantly positively correlated with meaning life scores. We expected that a love for viewing of the night skies would be more often sought by individuals high in openness to experience and agreeableness. We predicted that Not Kayla Door inventory scores would be significantly negatively correlated with neuroticism and intolerance of uncertainty scores. Now remember, neuroticism, if you score high in neuroticism, you have greater emotional stability. We also expected that Not Kayla Door inventory scores would not be significantly correlated with social desirability as measured by the Marble Crown scale. There would be no relationship difference between ethnicity and Not Kayla Door inventory scores. Thank you for joining.
Hi, my name is Eliseth Chavez, and I will be talking about the discussion section of our poster. As hypothesized, NI scores were positively correlated with the personality traits of openness to experience and agreeableness. These findings were consistent with work done by Kelly in 2004 and suggest that individuals scoring higher on NI may be more altruistic and empathetic, and may also report a willingness to connect with different concepts and embrace novel experiences. Additionally, NI scores were positively correlated with a search for meaning in life. A search for meaning in life was also significantly correlated with neuroticism and with intolerance of uncertainty. Endorsing a strong presence of meaning in life was not significantly related to NI scores. However, the presence of meaning subscale was significantly correlated with extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. The night sky coping scale was significantly correlated with search for meaning in life, even when the contributions of neuroticism and intolerance of uncertainty were statistically controlled. As such, the findings of the present study could support the implementation of night sky viewing as a coping strategy in therapeutic interventions for individuals who have neurotic anxiety and intolerance of uncertainty.
Okay, so that was fantastic. And then I have one more video that was submitted. Here. I'll try the same method.
Hello, everybody. My name is Denise Moratos. Thank you for letting me present today on my dissertation, which is titled Spiritual Emergence and the Individuation Process, exploring breakthroughs in extreme states. I'm a PhD candidate at Pacifica Graduate School in clinical psychology with a depth psychology emphasis. This research is an exploration of the experiences of individuals who have had transpersonal states of consciousness. These transpersonal states can also be called altered states, alternate states, numinous, extreme experiences, breakthroughs, transformative. It depends what each individual defines them as. The purpose of the study is to bring awareness to the healing that may occur when these individuals have an extreme experience. Usually it's diagnosed with as psychotic or schizophrenia or something of the sort. And people are really, really scared. And so they want to put a label on it and medicate the people. But we really want to find out what's the meaning of these experiences and how they facilitate the individuation process. And we want to investigate how they may assist in the transcendence of suffering. The main research question is, what are the perspectives, outcomes, and effects of transpersonal states of consciousness of those individuals who have been diagnosed by a mental health system with a mental health diagnostic label? This inquiry will encompass the way in which such individuals have come to accept or not accept the given label, how it informed their identity, how it influenced the ways in which they were seen by society, their family, their friends, their work environment. The research will also seek to discover whether or not the individuals who underwent such experiences eventually experienced healing or some kind of transformation, and possibly went from what we call a breakdown to a breakthrough or an awakening. The method I will use is a qualitative phenomenological approach, and the method is the Moustakas method. 6 people will be interviewed, including the researcher, so I will also be interviewed. The procedures include data collection that will draw on in-depth interviews that will be conducted and recorded or videotaped, and then transcribed using a dictation program. The interviews involve an informal and interactive process with open-ended questions and comments. So they can be very, very long, depending on how long the interviewee would like to talk. Reflexivity and presuppositions include, well, my interest, I guess. My interest in this topic comes from my own personal experience with altered states of consciousness. I've had a few, and my first one was very, very mystical. And I was also in contact. I was working in the mental health system in a closed facility before that experience occurred. And now I'm finally a clinician, and I'm also forced sometimes to diagnose mental health clients myself. I really would like the client to be able to diagnose themselves instead of the clinician. So that's my reflexivity on it. I'm now a clinician. I'm a psychiatric assistant, or a psychological assistant, sorry. And I'm also a coach and consultant on these experiences. And I also call myself, as many do, an expert by experience and a psychiatric survivor, because I survived the psychiatric system, which means I'm not drugged today or diagnosed with anything. What I anticipate finding is interesting. I anticipate that each participant will experience their extreme experience differently. I expect each interview to be very different. Some may have mystical or spiritual awakenings. Some may see it as positive. Others may see it as very negative. They may define it as scary or possessed by some entity, possessed possibly by a mythical character or a religious figure. And so it really depends on the individual experience. I also anticipate the findings will vary depending on how the mental health system treated each individual, how their human rights were taken from them, whether they were diagnosed and drugged involuntarily. Family and friends will also definitely come into the results, because there are many people who go through this experience who do not have a say, and their family and friends just lock them up. And so this will definitely come into the results. And this will influence the care and the outcome and the identity of the individual. I want to quote Lionel Corbett, MD and Jungian analyst, who suggests that a breakthrough permits the transpersonal dimension to emerge into consciousness, allowing for spiritual access. This is something hard to understand if you haven't studied Jungian psychology or depth psychology, but it really resonates with me, because I went through that exact thing. It was a spiritual access that opened up. The proposed study is relevant to clinical psychology because of the way the clinicians treat their clients today in psychotherapy, and the way in which other doctors treat their clients. All clinicians, not just mental health professionals, but also other doctors. The way in which society views mental health distress. Also the language that the media and others use to describe the mental health distress that people undergo. I believe it is essential to explore how the mental health professionals and other doctors have been authorized to assess people's subjective experiences and declare diagnoses, which as a result affect the course of their lives by altering their beliefs about their identities, personalities, and their sense of self. It is crucial to examine the definitions of the terms used to describe individual subjective experiences and diagnose individuals, and examine whether these descriptions are accurate accounts of their personal experiences. I hope you can follow me. I have a Facebook page, and I have a website called depthemergence.com, and I hope to publish this and present it live at a conference in the future. And I wish you good luck with the rest of this conference, and wish I could be there, but I am overseas at the moment, so it's 3 a.m. here, and I have a toddler and need to put him to sleep. So I will be coming to the US in a week or two, and I hope to be live with you guys once this virus or crisis is over. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, fantastic. I have 2 posters that we can view. I believe the presenters are not here. That way we can get them in the recording so people can also view them afterwards and just pause on them. So we've got Annalena.
Roxy, they were asking what was the presenter's name who just went?
Oh, I'm sorry. This was Denise Moratos that we just heard from, and I also have their poster that I can put up after these 2 that we have not yet seen. So here is, let me share my screen to.
Want to put her name just in the chat so we can.
Let's do that. I'm going to
read it.
Chat. And the other person that we heard from as well. So this is, Rich, do you want to maybe run through a little bit of what you're seeing here on the screen for this?
I'm seeing something from Point Park. It says the school sets the body standards, an analysis of adolescents, girls' perception of dress codes. And there's 3 authors. Annalena Hernandez, Isabella Yabagi, and Brittany Brinkman from Point Park. I can just read it, I guess. It has been demonstrated that the public school dress codes are rife with gender and racial discrimination in both theory and execution. Study 56 California high school handbooks for dress code policies found that their rules and rationales disproportionately targeted students based on race and gender, namely girls of color, boys of color, and white girls. When a similar content analysis of dress code policies was conducted in 122 North Carolina public schools, it was revealed that the policies placed undue restrictions on girls and reinforced traditional binary notions of gender. Would you like me to continue? Or,
what do you think?
Well, you know,
We got a nice
I never think it's a
view
great
there,
idea to
and
read
yeah,
to people, but you know, I mean, that's the, you know,
it's bedtime stories at this point, right?
yeah, it's you know, an important thing, right? We've seen a lot of incidents recently about hair and people's hair being illegal. I mean, these are important, you know, issues where kids are getting kicked out of school because of, you know, their body in a sense, you know. So, you know, I'm sure this is speaking to some of that, you know, your clothes that you wear, whether they're sexualized or accused of being sexualized and so forth.
I think these two pull-out quotes might be worth just reading because they seem very powerful.
Okay.
This one is somebody had said, yes, and I believe this might have to do with the fact that our male vice principal favors girls who are prettier than others and doesn't dress code them as often. Another participant, it sounds like, said, yes, I don't know why it happens or why it should matter that I'm wearing a sundress on a hot day. I just want to be comfortable, not made out to seem like a harlot trying to disturb everyone. I'm here to learn just like them. So why is my dress an issue? Which is very common from the experiences we hear of people that get dress coded. Fantastic work there. Thank you to Annalena and her colleagues. And then I have the last poster here that we've not seen yet from Chris. Okay, and this is rethinking complex trauma from an existential phenomenological approach. Fantastic poster. There's I wonder if it might be helpful just to read through the conclusion.
EP, which I assume is existential psychology, although I haven't seen it, attempts to understand the experiencers of child maltreatment in the broader sense of their lived experience, instead of narrowly focusing on reducing symptoms with a specific model of treatment that is said to target those negative symptoms. Thus, EP attempts to understand a richer consideration towards childhood maltreatment versus oversimplifying it to fit a one-size-fits-all model, as mentioned above. And coming from an open framework, other factors external from the person can be examined as aspects related to that person's current impacts of childhood maltreatment. Doctoral argues that by focusing on the difficulties as just situated in the individual, there is an overlooking of potential cultural and societal impacts. Broadening our understanding of childhood maltreatment allows for identifying new treatments not available in the medical model.
This is fantastic work, and it will be in that shared drive that you have the link to, and it will also be on the YouTube. You can pause it and hopefully be able to view it there as well. And then we heard from Montana, which is Melody, I believe. Yep. Melody is the first one that spoke with us. I wanted to share this poster. This is just a stunning visual. And she and her team did share their information about this presentation to us. This also will be available on the drive so that you will get a chance to view it more closely and in detail if you're interested. But I just thought that was a pretty cool looking one. And then the last we heard from Denise Moratos, and this was the poster that Denise submitted. The spiritual emergence and the individuation process, exploring breakthroughs and extreme states. And again, Denise went through their research in their video, and this will also be available on the drive for people to review if they would like to. I know we have some holders on here, and I really appreciate everybody. If we have any final discussion, we can give some time to that.
I'd just like to reiterate that we try to gather folks from all these different schools together once a month in a Zoom event just like this. And it's a great way to meet people from different humanistic traditions. Somewhere they're, we heard about Mustakis, and then we have folks from West Coast, East Coast, and people who study in Levinas and Heidegger and some of these other folks all around. And it's a great way to get new ideas and just be with some kindred spirits, which is very important, especially in a world that doesn't always, isn't always open to qualitative humanistic stuff. And especially if you're at sort of a mainstream school where you feel isolated, this is a great group to be with, because you can find kind of your people, your graduate students who have the same esprit de corps as you do. And so if you're interested, you can always reach out to me, and we can get you part of the student ambassadors from Division 32.
You can hang out with me and Bobak and Mookie.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if other people are, only a few months, but it's a blast.
It's exciting to see the ambassadors. I was a part of the student ambassador program not very long ago. Okay, very long ago. But and it was an exciting experience with Rich and fellow colleagues, and from there kind of elevated into then becoming a student representative, member at large, and now holding an executive board position with SHP. So this is very exciting to see you guys at that stage. I remember those days.
Yeah, it's. I would say it's been a wonderful experience seeing with the student ambassador experience back when Rich started that. As we were both on the board, and seeing the people that came in as student representatives, and now many of those people are now involved in the division on the executive board and running things, and like this conference. Roxanne, by the way, everybody give a big round of applause to Roxanne for the great job she's doing. She's really working hard to pull all these things off. So I really appreciate what you're doing, Roxanne. So thank you. But I remember Roxanne back in the not that long ago. Roxanne was a student. Now she's doing a fantastic job. So I really hope I want to put a word in for the student ambassadors and to get involved, because we need people to be involved to bring fresh ideas and energy, to the society, and this can have an impact in the larger APA, because we're kind of a minority voice. But if we get enough votes in APA, then we can have at least 2 council representatives there when they're voting on big stuff, policy issues that ultimately affect practitioners and researchers, and training in APA accredited programs. So that's a voice that we can have that actually can sometimes shift the dynamic of a conversation. When representatives get up at the microphone and make a statement, it can change the tenor of the whole conversation. So it makes a big difference. So that's just one way that Division 32 sort of has an impact within APA at large. So it can really make a difference. And the fact that you can get involved, you can create a lot of mentorship relationships, and there's opportunities to get published in our journal, the Humanistic Psychologist, and also Journal of Humanistic Psychology. A number of board members here. I'm on the board. Rich, I think, is on the board. Roxanne is on the board of JHP, right? And,
Yes.
So as you're doing this research, it's very important that you don't just stop and so it gathers dust in a library, but you carry it on into publication. And so reach out to somebody to you don't feel like you have to do that on your own, but a mentor who can help you do that. And I'm certainly willing to lend myself to assist anyone who would like to consult with me on that, or I'm sure anybody else in the division who's active in the division would be willing to do that as well.
I will vet Brent on that. I just recently reached out to him and asked him to help me out with the chapter that I'm contributing. So he's in it for real. And thank you so much for that glowing statement about the conference. This is the part that excites me the most, is seeing the students, the work that's coming up, the energy, the just passion for what you're doing, and supporting all of you. So I'm really grateful.
I'd mention there too is while we're doing this virtually right now, if we do get back to the in-person conference, Division 32 conference is a lot of fun. I mean, if you get a chance to go to that physical conference, we usually both are scholars, but also very social, and we enjoy being together, and we enjoy hanging out and having a glass of wine and talking about our philosophies and stuff like that. And a lot of very interesting projects have happened or got their beginnings when we're all just kind of hanging out, talking to each other, and after the conferences, after it's done, we're hanging out, having dinner, going out, and it's really a colleague type of thing. We like to hang out with each other. It's not just go do your thing and leave, right? It's very collegial. So if you get a chance to go to one of the Division 32 conferences, I greatly encourage you to do so.
Yeah, it's a very supportive environment too. It's like, there are some of these conferences that I've been to that are not 32, where it can be kind of cold, very professional. Like somebody looks at your badge and they see they're a student and then they walk the other way. Like, I'm not kidding. I remember having that experience of having my badge on APA and somebody looking at it and going, "Oh, student," and then walking away. You'll get the opposite experience at 32. Someone will be like, "Oh, you're a student. Do you know anybody here? Come with us. We're going out to dinner."
You do now.
It's a totally different vibe than most other conferences. It's all about, we love especially the young people and students, because not all students are young people, but and fresh faces. It's always a good time. I look forward to. It feels like a shot in the arm whenever I go to Division 32. It keeps me going the rest of the year. And given COVID, I've really missed it. But this is, it's not exactly the same, but it's better than nothing. The virtual meetings, but I'm looking forward to getting back to the real thing.
Absolutely. Well, I believe that if there's any other closing comments here, otherwise I have probably extended my stay for you guys. I really appreciate everybody sticking around and keeping that energy kind of flowing through. It's amazing to see all of you.
I got asked if I could turn off the light here. So it's time for a meeting.
So we're all done. Yes. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for your
all.
presence. Check the chat. The poster link is there. And we'll be up on SHP YouTube within probably about a week or so. And then you can review the presentations as well. Congratulations. Wonderful job.
Take care, everybody. Enjoyed it.